Okay, I want to share my story. You've probably heard part or parts of it at New City along the way. But this is how I share my story, or one of the ways I share my story with other people. I have not always been a pastor. Even though I grew up in a home, my parents took me to church like all the time. We were there as a kid growing up every time the doors were open. I was a part of youth group, Sunday school, all of it. And so I grew up in the church and knowing the Bible and knowing all the stories of the Bible, and I knew the gospel. There's no telling how many times growing up in the church that I had heard the gospel. I knew all the stories about Jesus, but I didn't really believe. And so as I got a little bit older, 16 especially, when I had some independence and could drive on my own, um, I was far from being a Christian. I had made a profession of faith when I was in the fifth grade and been baptized. I was really just afraid of going to hell. And that was the extent. I knew about Jesus and I didn't want to go to hell. As I grew up as a teen, I began to do a lot of things that were very unchristian, um, drinking and partying and that sort of thing. Even after high school into college, that was my life. Sadly, even when I got married, that was still a part of my life into my early and mid 20s even. I had a good job and I had lots of friends, and my life was miserable. I was miserable everywhere. If I'm honest, I was miserable at work, even though I had a good job, and I was miserable at home. I was miserable in my marriage. I was miserable everywhere. And I had looked everywhere for satisfaction and for joy. I thought it was in my job, and I thought making decent money and moving up the ladder would bring me satisfaction, and it didn't. I was miserable. I thought being married would make me happy, and it didn't. I was not happy there either. I had looked everywhere. I'd looked in drugs and alcohol and all of those places, and I was just miserable. I mean, my life was miserable. And I remember very distinctly one day in my misery thinking, I've tried everything else, I might as well try God. And so, like most things in my life, I was all in. I will try God and see if this works. Amy's family was in a church, Tabernacle Baptist Church, and so that was an easy jump for us to go to that church, and so we did. We started going to church, and as I heard about things going on in the church, I involved myself in those things. Like I said, I was all in. If I was going to try God, I was going to try God. So I found my Bible. I started going to Sunday school with Amy. We went to church. And then I heard about a men's group. And it was back in the days of Promise Keepers. And this men's group was meeting on a Sunday night. And I'm like, well, I'll try that too. So I went on a Sunday night to this small room upstairs at Tabernacle Baptist Church, and small room of guys that I didn't know, guys who were older than me. And I don't even remember what we talked about or they talked about. I'm sure I didn't talk about much at all during that meeting. But at the end of the meeting, a guy named Wendell Price, who was a Sunday school teacher, leader in the church, older man, Wendell Price was going to pray to close us. And Wendell laid his big hand on my shoulder as he was praying. And it was just a really simple thing. Wendell said, Lord, I don't know what this young man is going through, and I don't know what he needs, but you do. And I lift him up to the foot of the cross and to you. And when he said those words, I don't know what he said after that. I don't know what happened after that. But in that moment, for the very first time for me, Jesus became real. And in this crazy supernatural way, I was lifted up to the cross. I saw Jesus for the very first time. And I believed. I believed the gospel. I believed that Jesus had really died for my sins. I believed that the place of forgiveness and redemption was there on the cross. And I don't know any other way to describe it, but in that moment, I was there and I believed. And I tell you, ever since then, my life has been completely different. Man, what a day it was! It really was for me just a transformational day. My heart was changed. My desires were changed. Doesn't mean I always get it right, and I've always gotten it right. That's the farthest thing from the truth. Um, but I had a new heart for God, and I didn't want to pursue the same things anymore. I didn't want to try to find my joy and satisfaction in all of those places anymore. I had a new love, and it was Jesus. And since then, boy, there have been ups and downs, and I have not been perfect at all. But the one thing that has always been true is that God has been faithful. And so that's how I came to know Jesus. My life was changed. Within a few years of that night, I was serving in church. I was teaching in church. I was helping in a church plant, and it wasn't long before I was quitting my good paying job where I had a lot of happiness and satisfaction to go back to school to become a pastor of all things. Um, my life was changed by the night I met Jesus. Okay, so that's my story. Like depending then on who I was talking to or what I was talking about, I might talk about the family that I have here at church. If it's a Christian who is struggling with something, I might talk about the struggles there. But man, that's basically my life. I was blind and now I see. I was lost and now I'm found. So that was actually one of the longer versions of my story. I can shorten that thing down to an elevator version at the drop of a hat. So that's my story. What's yours?